Now, I this last week got a very long email from one of our class members asking me why my emphasis is so much different, and actually it sounded like it was contrary to some of the other teachers. And in that, Heidi's actually recording me because I want to send this to her, because it's going to kind of answer that question, because I think it's something that we don't want to leave go, because we're entering a phase of revelation that seems like God is getting to the point where he's had enough, and he's going to bring this to an end. And hearing David's last part of his sermon, you know that God never gives up. God never gets to the point where he stops wanting to save, to bring people back to an understanding of who he is. Most of what we know about the plagues comes from Ellen White, we as a church. And actually in other churches they talk about it, but haven't even a faint of clue of really what this whole thing is about. Ellen White wrote about the plagues mostly in the early 1850s when she wrote early writings. And if you look up what she's written, most of it is in early writings and a few little things. And when it says, I saw, I really believe that God did show her, just like he showed Daniel, just like he showed John. But when John and Daniel had their visions, they gave very little commentary. And so when we read Revelation, and when we read the book of Daniel, it's left to us to put the pieces together. And some things he said, Daniel wanted to understand. He says, Daniel, put this aside. This is not for your time. I'm giving it for the people later on. But sometimes he sent an angel and he explained a little bit about what was going to happen. But with Ellen White, she actually gives commentary. In fact, God gave her the vision so she could give some commentary. But her belief was still locked into the religion that she was coming out of, Methodism. And so she still had a little bit of a draconian view on the character of God, I believe. And she wasn't wrong in what she was doing. And it's not wrong to actually do a historical study, which is generally what we've done in Revelation, come from a historicist view of Revelation, because the history is what gives us the bearing for what is coming, because that was the metaphor for the end times. And so we really do need to know history. That's why I like to touch on it a little bit. But there are some things that, we don't have any bearing. Now with the 7 last plagues, which we are going into right now, we do have a history that we can look at. And that was when the Israelites came out of Egypt, and God sent the plagues to get Pharaoh to understand who God was. And that was the purpose of the plagues in Egypt. It wasn't to kill the Egyptians. He could have done that, couldn't he? He could have just come in, wiped out the Egyptians, okay, get out of here. But that's not his purpose. His purpose, when you think about the timeline of the slavery of God's people, who was it that went into Egypt? Who was the first Israelite to go into Egypt? Joseph. Now, whose progeny was Joseph's? Jacob's. And Jacob was the progeny of Isaac. And Isaac was the progeny of Abraham. So, Abraham was Joseph's great-great-grandfather. That's how close in time. When you think of history, and if you believe in the 6,000-year period or whatever, you know that even if you narrow it down to 6,000 years. And I'm not trying to say it's different, because I have my own beliefs. I don't carry in unless it's a private conversation. But you know that 4 generations is a very short time.
Yeah.
And do you know that when Abraham was called out of Ur, that one of Noah's sons was still alive? That's how close it was to the patriarchs, to the whole fall and all that. So the Egyptians were very, very close to the original people that were in Babel. So God had a plan to try to bring these people back to an understanding of himself. They had gotten into idolatry, and they worshiped things like flies and things like frogs, and they worshiped the river Nile, and they worshiped the gods that brought the harvest and things of this nature. And so, and we actually worship the God who brings the harvest, but not in the same light that they did. So the whole, about 2 months ago, maybe 3 months ago, I don't know, the class was kind of small, so some of you may not remember, but I had a Sabbath school, and I asked the question, I said there's a verse in the Bible that sums up what the whole Bible is about. And I asked if anybody knew that. And Jeannie Wheaton happened to be in the class that day. And she says, "Oh, are you talking about Genesis 3:15? I says, "I am." And I wanted to remind us, I wanted us to take you back to that verse, because it gives perspective of what we are entering into when we're entering into this discussion of the plagues. What does Genesis 3:15 say? Do you remember? It's the promise, the original promise given to Adam and Eve.
I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel.
Okay? Thank you. So God made a promise to Adam and Eve that he was going to put enmity between the serpent, Satan, who was Lucifer, who deceived Eve, and Adam actually succumbed to that deception, but through Eve. And so God was making a promise to his people for every generation that he would put enmity between the seed of the serpent. Does the serpent have seed? He has progeny. He has people that he deceives, that's his seed. And the woman's seed. And ultimately, the woman's seed represents Jesus Christ, the true people of God. So that was the purpose, and all of the Old Testament. Now I'm going to make a statement, and I hope you don't want to take me out and stone me for this. But all of the Old Testament, huh? Oh, well, I'm sure there's some out there. Good, I'm glad. I hid as many as I could when I came in here. But anyway, all of the Old Testament is there to develop this idea of the promise, to put enmity between the seed of the serpent and the seed of the woman. All of the things, all the destruction of the Amalekites and the Amorites and the Hittites and the Jebusites. Well, yeah, that's when David took over Jerusalem.
Randy, what's that word mean, enmity?
What enmity is kind of a gulf between people in their thoughts. When we have enmity, it doesn't mean we're enemies, although it can, but we just don't see eye to eye.
Oh, okay.
Does it kind of mean like there's a gap with some agitation?
Yes, yes, and definitely can lead to enmity, can lead to war, can lead to murder, all sorts of things.
Okay.
But it's the beginning
Hostility.
of separation.
Okay.
So the Bible has, in the Old Testament, is developing this idea to know exactly what God meant when he said he would put enmity. And it mixed in with all the things that we read in the Old Testament that we have trouble with are texts, just little gems of texts about who God really is. And most of it comes in Psalms, and a lot of it comes in Isaiah, but there are even ones over in the Genesis, Exodus, in the books of Moses, just really gems, but are really telling us about how God is going to develop this promise. Now, the New Testament, on the other hand, is the flip of that coin. And that the New Testament, the purpose of the New Testament, is to finish, to complete the promise. And the New Testament starts with what?
Genealogy of Christ.
Well, yes, it does, but the purpose of that is to give us confidence in who Jesus is. It starts with the birth of Christ.
I was going to say.
Is the most important thing. And it goes right up until God is finishing the promise. Now you remember that originally Adam and Eve, when all this whole thing started, Adam and Eve were in this utopia, this place of peace and joy, and walked with the Lord in the cool of the day. And God said, I'm giving you dominion over the earth. And with that dominion, I want you to mainly it was at that time in the garden, because their sphere of existence was fairly limited. I mean, they could go other places, I'm sure, but God gave this beautiful garden to them and said, I want you to tend it and I want you to govern it. So he gave them the ability to grow and to govern. Now, when Eve fell, she gave that dominion over, or Adam and Eve together, gave that dominion. In fact, Adam had to give it because he was the firstborn, and he was the one called the Son of God. He gave it, delivered it to Satan, to Lucifer, and who became Satan. Satan confirmed this when he took Jesus into the wilderness, and he says, all this has been given to me, and I can give it to anyone I choose. And if you do such and such, I'm going to give it to you. So he was taking that claim, and he actually even said when he was with Job, in the book of Job, when he came to that conclave in heaven, he said, Jesus asked him, what are you doing here, Job? He says, I'm here from walking to and fro in the earth. Basically telling Jesus that, things aren't looking very good for you down there. And Jesus says, well, you haven't considered my servant Job. So anyway, the book of Revelation is telling us how that enmity is going to be completed, how it's going to happen, that God is going to deliver back to his people that dominion he gave to Adam and Eve from the very beginning. So the idea that God is pouring out his plagues on people because now he's had it up to here, and he's going to get his vengeance, is a wrong way to think about it. In fact, when you go into the sermon today, David, I was pleased to hear him talking about this very thing. But he never gives up on people, on his creation. They give up on him. And he will go to the nth degree to make sure that they at least know that that he is on their side. The first plague, if you want to open up to it in Revelation chapter 16:2, the first plague is an angel pouring out a vial upon the earth, and it looks like the angel is taking from God a magical substance and pouring it on the earth, a chemical that's going to cause this noisome, I can never say that word, noisome and grievous sore on mankind. But if we go, I mentioned Job. If we go back to Job, that is the only time it's really mentioned, unless you consider leprosy to be a part of that scenario. But when Satan was talking to Jesus, he said, well, I have considered Job, and if you didn't protect him, hedge him about so much, Job would be one of mine also. And he said, to prove it, let me touch Job. And he says, well, no, you can touch the things he has, his possessions, and we'll see if you're right. So he did that.
And he takes everything except for the one who's going to sit there poking him, going, just give up and, curse God and die.
Well, don't get ahead of my story here. So anyway, and I'm just teasing. I don't mind you jumping in. So Job did that. Satan did that, and then he came back, and he says, "Well, what about Job?" And he says, "Well, it's because you protect Job that he doesn't come over to my side." He said, "Now, if you let me touch Job, it'll be a different story." And God said, "Okay, touch Job, but you cannot kill him."
Right.
So then he puts these terrible sores, these boils on Job. He couldn't sit down, he couldn't lay down, he was miserable. I've had one boil, and I had to walk around with something in my shirt so nothing even brushed against that. It's so sore, and I couldn't imagine. So here it is, but I'm only telling you this story for a reason to tell you what's going on in the book of Revelation. What was the purpose of Satan giving Job these boils? Now you may say your thing.
So he left the one person who would try to get him to speak out against the Father. That's his whole purpose.
Yeah. Yeah, he said, his wife even said, "Job, just curse God and die." That's how miserable Job was. His wife says, "You know, have you had a sick one where you when they finally pass, that you say, their suffering's done. You knew how much they suffered, and you knew how sweet death was for them when they finally died. It's terrible, but you have to admit that it's better that their life passed than them to continue on in that." That's where Job was. And his wife says, "Curse God and die." And Job did not do that. See, Satan's purpose with the plagues, and I say Satan because I really believe that Satan is the one responsible for what's going to happen with the plagues.
So she could have said, pray to the Father that you would die, but she didn't say it that way.
No.
Yeah, because she wanted him to commit suicide, basically.
Yes.
She wanted him to end his life because of his misery. And then going back to your point, affliction can either bring you close to God or have you curse God.
Okay.
And that's what Satan wants to do.
And you see, that's what exactly the enmity is about. God is trying to put enmity between Satan. He finished this enmity that he started. And actually, it was ratified. The enmity was ratified at the cross. When Jesus died on the cross, the enmity, the gulf, was as great as it ever had been.
Yeah.
And people understood, well, Satan understood that he had lost a great battle when Christ died. They were afraid, the demons I'm talking about, that maybe at this point Jesus would put an end to them. But see, Jesus is different than you and I. If I were Jesus, as soon as I came out of that tomb, I'd say, Satan, where are you? we gotta have this out. But he didn't do that.
He's not human.
No. Well, he is human,
Yeah,
but
not to that extreme.
he has the mind of God.
Yeah.
So anyway, Satan's purpose in giving, God said that he gave the vial to the angel, which, in our class, we've studied that out. We know that angel means messenger. To the messenger. And the messenger poured out his vial, and there was noise and sword. It doesn't give us the ins and outs of this whole thing. You've got to study that out yourself. And if you read Ellen White, you will see that she said it was the vengeance of the wrath of God that was being displayed. But like I told you before, and you weren't here when I explained that she had a very legalistic view of the character of God in her early stages. And you can see that as she got further and further into her writings, she actually matured. She had a relationship with God that said, oh, wait. Yes, it says that. Revelation said it was the wrath of God, that the vials were the wrath of God. And I every time the wrath of God comes up, I say, that's the passion of God. That's not anger. It is not anger. In fact, if you read the text, it doesn't even put anger in there. It's passion. And then there's another one, and it is the desire of God. So, and they both are interpreted as an angry God. Passion and desire. No, neither one of those are anger. It could be, if you were human, it could be, but for God, it's not. God has a passion for his creation to bring them back to himself and to be in his likeness. And his desire is not to lord it over us. He wants to give dominion back to humanity. He's going to bring them back to this earth and give dominion to us. We will be self-governing once again, and it'll be righteous. Yeah. We will never lord over anybody ever again because of what Jesus has done for us. But, to really properly discuss the vial, we need to go into 2 Timothy. And this may even take the whole time that we have here. 2 Timothy 2. And we're going to start with verse 15. And could somebody read 15, 16, and 17? I don't do like Eric go around the circle, but if you want to do that, we could.
Be diligent to present yourself approved to God, a worker who does not need to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. But shun profane and idle babblings, for they will increase to more ungodliness, and their message will spread like cancer. Hymenaeus and Philetus are of this sort.
Yes. This is the only allusion to that sore. And he said cancer, but the new King James says canker. And it's a sore that's on the skin that won't heal. We see cankers in people that have diabetes. We see cankers in people that canker sores in the mouth. Those are viral cause. We see people that get canker sores because they can't get up and they sit in one place for too long. Yeah. Causes what's called a decubitus ulcer, bed sores. So what Paul is saying here is that We need to study to know exactly what the Word of God says, and especially about our Father. And if you believe people with spurious thoughts, and I could be one of them. That's why when I'm telling you these things in this class, you need to go back and study it out, because I could be totally wrong. You need to study to show yourself approved. That you will not have this evil. But God is saying here that those lies that come out of people's mouth is like a canker. It's very much, that's the metaphor that we see in the first part of verse 2, of pouring out the vial and causing the boils. Now, we're not finished with 2 Timothy. Let me see. Somebody read 19 through 21. 2 Timothy 2, 19 through 21.
Nevertheless, the foundation of God standeth sure, having this seal: the Lord knoweth them that are his. And let everyone that nameth the name of Christ depart from iniquity. But in the great house there are not only vessels of gold and of silver, but also of wood and of earth, and some to honor and some to dishonor.
And then 21.
If a man therefore purge himself from these, he shall be a vessel unto honor, sanctified and meet for the master's use, and prepared unto every good work.
Okay. Now, why did I include that in my discussion about the swords? You see, that word vial simply means a vessel, a carrier, if you look it up. And it says here